Well, good morning. It seems like February put wings on and just flew by. I remember being here the first Sunday that we started talking about visioning, and I suggested on that Sunday that the service that I was going to be most interested in was the one today. And that's because generosity has had the biggest impact on my life. And there's one particular person that has had a truly large impact on my life. And her story starts almost 115 years ago. She was born on March 7th, 1908, to a woman whose name is Lucy McCarty in a town near Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And you might wonder, how did a little gal from the Pacific Northwest become acquainted with Osceola McCarty, who was born on March 7th, 1908, and I'm about to tell you that story. Lucy was raped in the woods when she was returning home for caring for a relative. She never married. She only had one child, Osceola. She lived with her mother, who was Julia, and she lived with an aunt who was Evelyn. So Osceola grew up with her three female relatives in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. At age 8, first of all, those three women earned their living by cleaning houses, cooking for other people, and doing their laundry. By age 8, Osceola was ironing for other people. She was also earning a little bit of money at that time, and she put it in her doll buggy. As she grew older, she became a laundress in Hattiesburg. In fact, her entire life was being a laundress. And this is her words. I would go outside and start a fire under my wash pot. Then I would soak, wash, and boil a bundle of clothes. Then I would rub them, wrench them, rub them again, starch them, and hang them on the line. After all I had the clean clothes on the line, I would start on the next batch. I'd wash all day, and in the evening, I'd iron until 11. I loved the work, the bright fire, wrenching the wet, clean cloth, white shirts shining on the line. Hard work gives your life meaning, stated McCarty. Everyone needs to work hard at something to feel good about themselves. Every job can be done well. Every day has its satisfactions. If you want to feel proud of yourself, you've got to do things you can be proud of. So, in 1969, Red Cross sent me to Hattiesburg. I did not meet Osceola at that point, but I worked within blocks of her. My work was helping people recover from the Hurricane Camille, which was one of the worst hurricanes we've had in our history, and I worked in Hattiesburg for 6 weeks, where the paved roads left off and the dirt roads began. That's where I worked. The tin roofs were blown off of people's shacks. Their mattresses, everything they owned was destroyed. And I learned about racism, and I learned about the difference that it was for me growing up in the Pacific Northwest. It became very real what happens in Mississippi and probably in other places in the South. But fast forward to 1996. My niece graduated from Harvard, and I was invited to go to the graduation. And when I got to the graduation, up on the stage was Maya Lin, who designed the Vietnam Memorial, which also was very close to my heart since I spent a year in Vietnam and understood what the meaning of that memorial was. And Walter H. Annenberg from Philadelphia, who was the publisher of the Philadelphia Inquirer, 17 magazine, the TV Guide, a major philanthropist and an ambassador to the United Kingdom during, I think it was the Nixon years. And there was Osceola Clark from Hattiesburg, this little woman up on the stage. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's she doing up there? Well, there's a story there. That doll buggy that she was putting those little coins in, one day she decided she needed to put them someplace else, and unbeknownst to her family, she went down to the bank and she put her few pennies in that bank. And over the years, a little bit of everything she earned, and you can't imagine that it was very much being a laundress all those years, She kept putting her money, a little bit of money, in there. Her life was very simple. She never learned to drive. She only had a 6th grade education. She never married. She didn't have children. She lived a very simple life. But she believed in putting just a little bit away after she went to church, and she tithed there. In 1994, a bank trust officer noticed that she had $280,000 in the bank. She was at that point, I believe, 86 years old, and she was still working. The bank trust officer talked to some people in town and said, I think it would be good to have a conversation with Osceola. And so they made it rather simple for her. They brought her in and talked to her about what she might want to do, because she had been thinking and talking a little bit about that. And they tore up some papers into 10 different sections. And they wrote, like, if there's a 10% on each one of these, what would you do with it? To help her decide how she wanted to spend her money. First 10% went to her church. The next 10% went to some relatives that she had in Mississippi. The last 60% went to the University of Southern Mississippi, immediately. I figure it was a little over $150,000 that just left her like that. And she wanted it set up for scholarships for African American Black students that came to the college that might not have the means to go to school, and to make their life a little bit easier than hers had been. However, she was very grateful for the life she had. As her story unfolded, I could not believe what I was hearing, because I had been touched in Sunday school about the very scripture that we had tonight about the widow's mite. I've always thought about, what is it to be truly, truly generous in this life? Those are big questions. It's not just generosity with your money or generosity with your time. It's bigger than that. It's generosity with how you treat other people. It's generosity and hospitality. It's generosity of thoughts. It's so big. And her life, Osceola's life, exemplified that for me, that somehow she found the bearings to live a life that I so truly, truly admired. And it's brought tears to my eyes so many times. So that's how her life intersected with mine. Interestingly, though, over the years, her name pops up. One day I was down in the library, a little library box down in Wild Lake, and there was a children's book about Osceola. Then this just happened this last fall. It happens from time to time. I took my niece, my great niece, down to the Visionary Art Museum, and we're over in the big barn, and up over the elevator is a quote from Osceola. I pointed it out to Maris. I said, you know, when I was at your aunt's graduation at Harvard, I was impacted by her life, and I was able to tell that story to my great niece, Maris. Maris, 2 weeks later, sends me a text and says, Aunt Barb, in my sociology class, we just started talking about Osceola. She's mentioned in the book. So I'd like to say a couple of things about generosity. First of all, I believe it manifests in a big way. Ted Turner gave over $1 billion after he heard her story. The people of Hattiesburg tripled the scholarship. All over this nation, people know about Osceola Carter, the little gal in Mississippi who washed clothes for other people. I'd like to just briefly give you another definition about generosity. There's 7 forms of generosity. It's in thoughts, it's in words, it's in money, it's in time, it's in things, it's in influence, and it's in attention to what we pay attention to. There's 5 qualities of altruist or of generous people. They're altruistic, they're optimistic, they trust in life, they trust in the abundance of our world. They trust in the energy and the ability to lead. So one of the final words that I would like to leave you with is with some from Osceola. A journalist from People magazine asked her why she didn't spend the money she saved on herself. And she answered with a smile and said, "Thanks to the pleasure that comes from making this gift, I am spending it on myself." I start each day on my knees saying the Lord's Prayer. Then I get busy about my work, McCarty told one interviewer. You have to accept God the best way you know how, and then he'll show himself to you. And the more you serve him, the more you are able to serve him. The more you serve him, the more you will be able to serve him. And our only regret is that she didn't have more to give. So with that story and how it's impacted my life, we have some questions, and we're going to take a moment of quiet. Did the picture of Osceola get up on the? So everybody saw it. I didn't see it, but is there a way to go back, Dawn, to show the picture again? That the young woman that she's hugging, that's the first scholarship that her last name is Brumbaugh. I think it was Shirley Brumbaugh, and she was going to school. She had a twin brother who her family could afford to send to college, but they could not afford to send her. So she is the first scholarship made possible by Osceola.